All right, let's jump right into this explainer and see exactly how George Washington built the traditions of the American presidency from absolute scratch. You know, when we think of the United States government today, we picture this massive, well-oiled machine with clear rules, rigid structures, and centuries of tradition. But back in 1789, none of that existed. There was literally just a piece of paper, the Constitution, and a brand new country holding its breath, waiting to see if this grand experiment in democracy was actually going to work out. Imagine, for a second, stepping into the most powerful role in a brand new country with absolutely no precedent and no example to follow. How do you lead a new nation with no rule book? There was no blueprint for how an American president should act, who they should ask for advice, or even when they should stop leading. Every single choice the first president made was going to set a precedent. It was a completely immense burden, and historians agree that at the time, there was really only one person the young nation trusted enough to figure it out. So, Chapter 1, a brand new presidency. To understand how the office was defined, we first have to look at the incredibly unique status of the man who held it. George Washington wasn't just another politician. He was this towering, unifying figure in a country that was, frankly, still trying to figure out if it even wanted to be entirely united. Now check this out. In 1789, the Electoral College did something that has literally never happened since. They selected him as the first president with a 100% unanimous vote. It's a distinction of universal support that no other president has ever received. When the new Constitution created the office of the president in 1787, most political leaders just assumed Washington would be the natural choice. But where did that unparalleled level of trust actually come from? Well, that massive trust stemmed from a highly unusual decision he made back in 1783. He voluntarily resigned his military command and just returned to civilian life at his Mount Vernon home. Think about it. After leading the Continental Army to victory, Washington could have easily leveraged his military might to seize absolute control. Kings and conquerors throughout history, they usually kept their power, but Washington just walked away. This single act of voluntary restraint earned him widespread respect, not just across America, but across the globe. He proved he could be trusted with power simply because he had already proven he could let it go. Which brings us to Chapter 2, Setting Lasting Traditions. Because Washington was the very first, his everyday daily choices transformed from mere habits into unwritten rules. He wasn't just managing a country, he was actively designing the presidency through his actions.
Take the cabinet, for example. Even though the Constitution didn't strictly require it at all, Washington intentionally established a group of trusted advisors. He brought in brilliant and often intensely clashing minds, like Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State and Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury. By simply surrounding himself with these experts, he created what we now know as the cabinet, an absolute staple of the executive branch that every single president has relied upon ever since.
And then there's the two-term limit. The crucial point here is that by choosing to step down after 8 years, he set a voluntary two-term tradition that lasted all the way until the 22nd Amendment officially made it law in 1951. The Constitution originally placed absolutely no limit on presidential terms. He could have stayed in office until he died. But Washington recognized that for a true republic to survive, the presidency could not be a lifelong appointment. His deliberate choice to pack his bags after 2 terms solidified the idea that the office belongs to the people, not to the person holding it. Moving on to Chapter 3, Testing the Young Nation. Now, it's one thing to set up an office. It is an entirely different thing to see if that office holds any real weight when a crisis actually hits. Right inside his own cabinet, deep disagreements started brewing between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson over the proper size and role of the federal government. Hamilton wanted a strong, active central government and a national bank, while Jefferson envisioned a much more decentralized republic focused heavily on the states. Washington had to carefully navigate these fierce ideological battles, and historians point to this exact dynamic as the very early roots of America's first political parties. And domestically, the tension wasn't just happening in meeting rooms. It spilled right out into the streets. When Pennsylvania farmers violently protested a new federal tax during the 1794 Whiskey Rebellion, Washington personally led federal troops to suppress it. This wasn't some tyrant-crushing dissent, though. This was a vital early test. It proved to the young nation and the watching world that the new federal government actually had the authority and the raw strength to enforce its own laws.
Internationally, the stakes were just as high. Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality in 1793 to deliberately avoid entangling the young United States in the massive, ongoing war between Britain and France. He knew the fragile American Republic just couldn't survive being dragged into a European bloodbath. So this precedent of prioritizing American stability over foreign entanglements became a bedrock cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy for generations to come.
Chapter 4. The Ultimate Choice. Having successfully navigated these early crises, balancing his clashing cabinet, enforcing federal law, and keeping the country out of a massive war, Washington approached the end of his second term and made what is arguably his most defining legacy choice yet. In 1796, instead of running again, he published his famous farewell address. This wasn't just a simple goodbye letter, it was literally a roadmap for the future. He explicitly offered guidance cautioning the young nation against the dangers of divisive political parties, warning that intense factionalism could tear the republic apart, a warning that, let's be honest, still echoes today. He also strongly warned against forming long-term foreign alliances. These weren't laws he was writing. They were the hard-earned lessons of a founding father trying desperately to protect what he had built. And that brings us to Chapter 5, Passing the Torch. As we enter our final chapter, it becomes incredibly clear that Washington's decisions were ultimately all about establishing a permanent system that was far greater than himself. His entire presidency was basically a masterclass in establishing power by knowing exactly when to let it go. When you follow his timeline here, you see this brilliant journey of legacy building through restraint. From resigning his military command in 1783, reluctantly taking the oath of office in 1789, walking the tightrope of neutrality in 1793, proving federal strength during the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794, to finally leaving us his farewell address in 1796. Every single major milestone wasn't just about solving a problem in the moment, it was about setting a lasting standard. Washington passed away in 1799, just a few short years after retiring to his beloved Mount Vernon. But historians universally agree that his ultimate contribution was showing the entire world that a peaceful, voluntary transfer of power was actually possible. By the time of his passing, the American presidency wasn't just an idea on paper anymore. It was a functional, deeply respected institution, entirely defined by the very boundaries Washington had willingly placed upon himself. So as we wrap up this explainer and consider his incredible legacy of voluntary restraint, we have to look ahead to the physical construction of the permanent government buildings in a brand new city bearing his name. And we're left with a really fascinating question. The precedents are set, the cabinet is formed, the two-term tradition is born. As the bricks are literally being laid for the new Capitol and White House, who could possibly step into the house that Washington built? And how are they going to change it? That is exactly what we'll be exploring next time. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.